Okay, so we are live. Welcome. I'm sorry about being a little bit late. We were trying to get it to live stream over on our YouTube channel, and we're having some difficulties with YouTube. And I was having some problems with Facebook this morning. There's a large bourbon distillery on fire in Kentucky. So right now, perhaps that is what is holding things up. So I apologize for being a little bit late. We try to stream on both YouTube as well as Facebook because there's folks who follow us on both or who aren't a part of Facebook, and we just weren't able to make it a go this month. So we will try, we will put a recording up on YouTube later. So if you have a friend that you'd like to share it with who's not in the clubhouse, you could share the link to the recording on our YouTube channel later. That'll be up by tomorrow morning, and we'll try to get the kinks worked out. It's always a little interesting trying to do something live on two different platforms with everything going on. So I appreciate your patience, and I'm glad that you're here, and welcome, and I so appreciate you spending time with me. I know that you have a lot of choices about where you spend your time, and I appreciate you taking the time to spend a little part of your day with me. We have a lot of great things planned for you for this Clubhouse meeting. And I do encourage you to sign up for our newsletter because we always talk about and remind you about our upcoming Clubhouse meeting, as well as any interesting little items that we have. I like to include little fun links for you in our newsletter to fun little quilty items that maybe you haven't come across. But do sign up for that newsletter so that you're notified whenever we do have a Clubhouse meeting or have some interesting event or other activity going on. So sign up for that. So today our program is all about how to do stops and starts for machine quilting. So you're going to approach stops and starts a little differently depending on your use of whatever quilt you're working on. So a stop and a start on a baby quilt that's going to be washed and dried a million times and drug around with the dog on it is going to have a different stop and start than that quilt that you're going to enter into the state fair for competition. So we're going to look at a few different ways of stopping and starting. So I have the APQS Freddy here. And the techniques we're going to talk about would be for use with a stand-up machine or a sit-down machine, both domestic and long arm. So we're going to look at some different ways to stop and start. So the most common way would be for utilitarian quilts. So quilts that are going to get washed a lot, laundered a lot, not into competition, heavy duty, heavy use quilts. And so in that case, what I would use is a tacking stitch to kind of hold those stops and starts down. So I'm going to just bring my bobbin thread up to the top. So I'm going to go needle down and needle up. And then when I move the machine to the side and pull, I can pull that bobbin thread up to the top. And I'm going to go back to that same start position. And I'm just going to put my finger down on the throat of the machine. And I'm going to press the single stitch button and hold. And what that will do with my APQS Freddy here is just take a series of little tiny stitches. And what I'm doing is I'm taking basically like 6 to 8 little tiny stitches all in a row. So I'm just going to go little bitty tiny stitches, and then I'll back up over the top of that stitching with 2 larger stitches, and then I'm going to get going right back on top of where I've already stitched. So it's basically having 3 repeats, 3 layers of thread right over that start position. So I took 6 little tiny bites, and now I'm going to go back to my start, and then I would get started stitching. So I got needle down, and I would get started stitching. So as you can see, here I'll go back to where we started. Take a look, there is thread buildup when you do something like this. So, this is not the way that I would stop and start something for a competition quilt because you're going to have some thread buildup. Of course, we're using green thread on yellow fabric, so it's really going to show, right? But you will have some thread buildup there. So if my thread were to break, I could start and stop the same way. So if my thread were to break or my bobbin thread were to run out, I would do the same little tacking stitch technique just behind where my bobbin thread ran out or my top thread broke. So I would do those little tiny 6 little stitches forward, 2 back, and then go right on top of where I was stitching. And it would do 2 things. It would tack off where I ended, and it would tack off my beginning. And there would be thread buildup there. So if you have the opportunity and you have different, pattern fabrics, perhaps you want to do that in a darker pattern fabric area of your quilt top if you're running a darker thread, so that you can kind of mask or mimic, or not mimic, but camouflage those stops and starts. So if I'm doing all over edge to edge, and I would do these off the edge of the quilt or in the binding area before I start my all over edge to edge, so that that will kind of hide that thread buildup. It'll be where the binding is, so the binding will kind of cover it and hide it, so you won't even see my stops and starts. Of course, if I ran out of bobbin, I wouldn't have that choice. I'd still have to have these, this thread buildup area where I restart my thread if I run out of bobbin or my top thread breaks. Okay, so I'm just going to cut those threads. Now let's talk about how we would handle stops and starts if you are in a more obvious place. So sometimes you want to do your stops and starts and they're in a place where if you had thread buildup, it would draw the eye, or you're entering it into competition and you don't want to show anywhere where your thread stopped and started. So let's look at how we would knot and bury to hide stops and starts if we wanted to hide those areas. So I'm going to go ahead, let's just pretend, so here we are, we're at the end of our line of stitching, and I want to stop, I want to hide that line of stitching. So I don't want to do my tacking stitches, right, because that will have that thread build up. So instead, I'm just going to drag that thread out, and I'm going to hook it with my finger, and I need to bring my bobbin thread up to the top. So I'm back at that same start point, and I'm going to go needle down and needle up, and now I'm going to pull the machine aside, and my bobbin pulls his little head up, and I can pull out some slack from my bobbin, so I have plenty of tail there to deal with. And I'm going to go ahead and cut my bobbin and cut my top thread. So I've pulled out some slack, and I'm going to cut my bobbin, and I've pulled out some slack, and I'm going to cut my top. And then when I move my thread aside, you see how there's 3 threads here? I got a top, a bottom, and then something else. I need to know which one of these is still attached to the bobbin. So to know that, if I just drag my machine away, my little bobbin pops back under. Now I've only got the 2. Okay, so I've got a top thread and a bobbin thread, and I'm going to separate them so that I have a space there to work with. And I'm going to take a needle, and I'm going to just place it right between where the top thread and the bobbin thread come up. I'm going to try to keep my machine right there so that you can see it with the camera. And now I'm going to put, I'm going to knot that, and the needle acts as an air gap so that that knot is kind of suspended up off the surface of the quilt just a little bit. And I generally do 3 of these. So see that? There it goes. Okay, so now I've got it, 3, a nice decent knot there on the end. And what I'm using here is a self-threading needle, and I'm hoping that you can see this. Let me put it, let's see if I can put it on my manicure that needs a refresher, maybe on the back of my finger, that'll be better. Okay, so this is a self-threading needle. So there's an opening at the tippy top of that needle, and I can pop my thread onto the needle. I don't thread the eye, I pop it on. And I want to pop it on not up here close to the knot that I made, because sometimes when you pop it on, it's going to break the threads, and I don't want to take that chance. So I want to go far away, and I want to try to pop it on far away so that if it were to break thread, I would still have more thread I could try. Okay, so I'm on. I just popped it on. I'm on the thread, and now I'm going to go back to where my last stitch was that came out of my fabric, and I'm going to go right back into that hole, and I'm going to travel inside that batting area, and then I'm going to pull that thread through, and as I pull, I'm going to pull that knot down into the surface of the quilt. So there it is. There is my stop, and of course my start would be exactly the same. So there are 2 self-threading needles. This one, like I said, has a little opening in the tippy top. And then you may have seen, this is called a side threading needle. So the opening is right there at the base of the eye, and the thread kind of slips into that opening and then up into the eye. And so now it's threaded there. So it may be that you want to use this one so that you can thread that eye more easily. It just depends on which one of these needles is best for you. Some people use large eye needles, so they use one that has, oh, it's for like, I don't want to say upholstery, but like crewel work or embroidery work, where it just has a bigger eye there on the needle. So that is stops and starts, whether you are doing it for utilitarian work or you're doing it more for something you're going to enter into a competition, or you don't want that stop and start showing. So I hope that was helpful to you. I'm always interested to know, what topics you want to cover and what things you're interested in. So do let me know. You can post that request there in the Quilted Joy Clubhouse. You can also send me an email or use the contact page there within the Quilted Joy website. So hopefully one of those ways will work for you, and you can let me know, or just post your topic with your questions, because we always like to get some more information about what you like to see here on in the Guild meeting. So I want to thank our sponsor, APQS. APQS is 100% handcrafted in Iowa, and they are loved the world over with a lifetime warranty. If you are looking for a long arm machine or a sit-down long arm machine, APQS has something that'll fit the bill. So just contact your local dealer or contact one of your local showrooms and schedule a test drive and take a look at the different long arm machine options that you may have to pick from. All right, I do have some favorite things. So I want to show you some things that have recently come in. We are head over heels in love with fabric collage animals. And I've done two. I've done elephant, Lulu the elephant. So these are Laura Heine patterns. I've done Lulu the elephant, and then I made my own animal. I did a penguin, but the same technique. And then I've taught this class in multiple places, different places in the country, as well as many times here in the studio, in the Quilted Joy studio in Louisville, Kentucky. And we're getting ready to teach it again. We're ramping up for another round of it. Every time we teach it, it is sold out. But we do have two new patterns that just arrived, and I'm in love with them. So I have a niece who is head over heels about unicorns, everything unicorns. And so I'm thinking that this might be a good quilt to make for her. Of course, these aren't snuggle quilts, right? These are more to hang on the wall. So definitely not snuggle quilts, but still very special. So that is Nola. That is the unicorn collage. So brand new. It just got in, I think today or yesterday. It walked in the door here. Super adorable. And then the other one that is new for us that was just released as well is the cloth sloth. So sloths are becoming really popular on fabric. I'm seeing them a lot of different places. So isn't this cute? It's a little sloth, all made out of the fabric collage technique. If you've never done this technique, it is super fun, and it can be a little intimidating the first time you do it. So you might like to be in a class to do it the first time. But it is really, really fun and really rewarding. We have other patterns as well. It's just I wanted you to see these two because they are brand new for us. So hopefully you enjoy that. So we were going to talk to Carol Larkin. She has a studio, and we were going to take a look around her studio. It looks like we're having some difficulty connecting with Carol. So we will try again here in a little bit, but if not, then we will connect with Carol on another month. So we're going to try to reset that, and hopefully that will work. But in the meantime, let's take a look at our design roundtable. So Anna, I have chosen your quilt to pick and to show how I would quilt this quilt if it were my quilt. If you have a quilt that you would like submitted, I do ask for those. You'll see the post go up inside the Quilted Joy Clubhouse, and I'll ask for submissions, and then people post the photo of their quilt top, their unquilted quilt top, and then I'll select one and then break down how I would quilt it if it were my quilt top. So Anna, I think your quilt is great. I'm not sure of what the pattern name is for this quilt. I wish I knew, but I think it's wonderful. When I look at your quilt, it is reminiscent of flowers and leaves and a little garden. So a little modern kind of garden to me is what I see. So the first thing I started to do when I saw your quilt, Anna, is to think about how I could bring out and make these more floral. So I'm just going to zoom in so that we can, I'm going to zoom in one more time, and pan over. So this one will probably be, let's see, this one. Let's draw on this one. So by the way, I am using a tablet that I can draw on photos within my computer. It just turns my mouse into a, it's in the shape of a pen, so it's just easier to draw. And I'm just going to kind of play with ideas. So the first thing I played with was how to make this into more of a flower. So I started at the center and I kind of swirled out. And then I thought, okay, if I put like a petal there and then made this into a leaf, and then a petal there and made this into a leaf. Yeah, and then a petal there and made that into a leaf, and a petal and made that into a leaf. So that's where I started. And then I was like, but what about these, you know, outside bits, so these outside squares? I'm just going to zoom out so you can see how those are repeated around this area. And I just thought it just didn't fill the space. And I don't know, the petal, a flower with only 4 petals, it just wasn't doing much for me. So I wanted to use this space a little more efficiently. And so then what I started thinking about was, okay, so maybe what I should do is swirl out, and then when I hit this corner, I can put a lowercase l, and then go out to a point, and then make my leaf shape. Okay, so I have a lowercase l, and then come out here to a point, and then make my leaf shape. So let me see, I've got it. I went the opposite way, so let me swirl this around this way. L, and then a leaf. Oh, that's what I did. Okay, so I'm running into the same issue I had last night, because I'm like, well, gosh, if I do this, I'm going to wind up over here, and once I do this petal, then how am I going to travel? Because do you see how I wound up here? And I'm like, I need to be in this area, and I've pinned myself in. So in order to fix that, what I thought was, okay, so instead, if I do a little dip into the center, yeah, and then that same lowercase l, and then that same little pointy bit, and now do my leaf. Yeah, now look what happens. Little dip in, little lowercase l, little pointy bit, and now do my leaf. So do you see how adding that little dip in, that little third piece to the element, allows me to travel? That's that magic rule of 3. And we've talked about that magic rule of 3 before. So if you do 2 repeats, 2 lines of stitching, 2 elements, it'll return you back to where you started. If you do 3, then you can move forward. And now I can do my last leaf. So that's what I came up with for the look of each of those flowers. All right, so let's take a look at how that looked, all stitched out. So there we go. I'm going to zoom in and kind of move around so hopefully you can see it a little bit better. All right, so I'm going to zoom in and move around, and there you go. Hopefully you can see that a little bit better. So now I have all of my little flowers dealt with, and then I started thinking about those sashing designs. And what would I put out here in the sashing? So I got out just a straight line, and I started thinking, okay, if I connect from this corner to this corner, let me zoom in and maybe that'll help too. Zoom in, and I want to pan over. Okay, so here I am. I went from this corner to this corner, and now I'm going to go to here and back up to this corner. And what I did is I just designed one segment at a time. So I'm like, okay, that would be that one. And then if I came back the other way, and this is part of my auditioning processes, I'm just trying to see what looks nice. So that looks nice. Let's keep going. I'm going to go down this way so I can see what it looks like when it turns. Yeah, and I'm going to come back this way because it's not continuous yet. I need to kind of figure that part out. But at this point, I just want to kind of get a sense of what this is going to look like. Let's go up to see if I even like it. And then I can start to think about how to do it continuously. All right, so once I got to this point, I can start to see what's going to happen once I hit that where the sashing all comes together right here. So then I can see what's going on here where the sashing all comes together. And the easiest thing to do in here would just be a straight line to just cross this. And it makes a little diamond star in there, and I think that looks really nice. So once I kind of had an idea of what that was going to look like, then I could start to worry about traveling. So let's do it here. So now when I'm going to worry about traveling, so I'm going to go from here and then down to this corner and up to this corner, and I'm going to go across to this corner. Now do you see what's happening? Then to this corner and up to this corner, and of course now I've hit my outer edge here. But you can see how I could go all the way across a sashing space now that I have a sense of how all those lines are going to interconnect, and I would keep on going. Okay, so let me zoom out here just so you can see what we did. That's what we were doing here together. Let's see what this looks like all put together, even with those outside bits done. So there's the sashing. So I'm going to zoom in so you can see it's exactly what we were just looking at. So there's, we go from one corner to this corner, across the street to this corner, and down here, and across. And of course, there's only, if you're on a stand-up machine, there's only so far you can go, and then you're going to have to come back and probably break your threads, because when you're doing this bit, this top to bottom bit, you're only going to be able to work in repeats of however big the throat of your machine is. Whereas the left to right, the east to west coast to east coast side, you could do that all in one continuous swoop, because you can travel across the length of your table. All right, so let's zoom out and let's just see how that all looks. So nice, right? It gives you kind of a, some structure, and it's got some straight lines that match up with the curvy lines. All right, so then I started looking at this outside border where you got all of these squares. One of the challenges, one of the things to look at is, do they line up? Ooh, I zoomed out instead of in. Let's zoom in. And let's zoom in one more time. So one of the challenges is, if you notice, these intersections don't line up with these intersections, because that was the other bit. I was like, oh, I could just continue on with my straight lines into each of these squares. But because these intersections don't line up, I'm going to need to do something different in those outer squares. And that's where I came back to the same idea that we did inside each of these flowers, where it's kind of an orange peel design. And I thought, well, that's what I could do. I could just go through and do that dip in, dip out, dip in, dip out, now travel to the next one. Dip in, dip out, dip in, dip out, and travel to the next one. Dip in, dip out, dip in, dip out, and travel to the next one. And then when I come back, so I'm leaving the bottom parts all undone, right? You remember I will need to complete this, so the whole bottom bit is undone. So when I come back, I can fill in that bottom area, and now I will have repeated the same motif in all of these little squares that I used in the center of all of my flowers. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So I'm going to zoom in so you can see this a little bit better. And I'm going to pan up. So there you go. Now I can quilt much better than I can draw. Okay, so don't get too, when you're doing this and designing stuff and drawing, don't get all bunched up about it being perfect. All you need to do is kind of have the thought process and the understanding in your brain of the path, and then you can take it to the machine. Okay, I'm going to zoom out. So now I'm left with this outside plain border, and what can I do with this outside plain border? And so what I thought about doing was connecting the outside plain border with some strong diagonal lines. So take a look at what I did here. So I went from the center of this sashing space up to the center of this sashing space. So I'm just going to change the color of thread so that you can, the color of my drawing. So I know there's a center here, right? And there's a center here, and there's a center here between each of those sashing spaces. So when I did my lines, I went from the center of the sashing up to the center of this sashing and back to the center of this sashing. So I did those kind of chevron shapes, and to travel the corner, let me zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to pan over. So that's how I went around the corners. And then I echoed that with a second line inside of it. So it went up to that meridian line just under it and then headed on. So it kind of echoed that initial straight line. All right, so let's zoom out so that you can see that. So that's the kind of frame that I put around the outside, and then I got to thinking about this area here. So this area here just seemed a little, I don't know, unquilted. And I felt like I really needed to put something in this area right here. And so there's any number of things that you could put in there. You could put a curl. Let me change to a curvy line. So you could put a curl. Yeah, that's a choice. I think what I did was a teardrop and a little, like this gets to be very formal, so you have to decide if this is going to be appropriate for each of those spaces. So let's take a look and see what I did. I think I just did a little. Oh, okay, so not well drawn, but you'll get the idea. Let's zoom in. So I repeated that lowercase l shape, and I made a little leaf shape and put a lowercase l in it. So not the best drawn, but you get the idea. So when you're designing a quilt, if you can pull an element out, so in this case that lowercase l out into the outer border, it'll help tie in. So we pulled the center of our flower out into this border, and we pulled the lowercase l with the leaf shape out into the outer border. And it helps pull the whole voice of that quilt in together. So there you go, Anna. I hope that you like what I did, and I hope that others, I hope that you can kind of, if I talk through my design process and what I go through in my head and show you kind of the roadblocks I'm up against and then how I get around those, hopefully that will help you start to look at things in a new light and get some understanding of how to break down a quilt top and decide what to quilt where. Because it's the number one question that I get is how do I quilt this? So I hope that helped you. And if this meeting helps you, if you enjoy the Clubhouse, I would love it if you would leave us a review or share it with one of your friends. I read every review personally, and it means a lot to me to know that what I'm doing matters to you and that it's helpful to you. When I teach, I'm lucky enough that I get to see the light bulbs go off over the heads of my students in the room with me, but virtually I can't see you, so I can't see the light bulb go off. So I would love it if you would leave us a review. You could leave a Google review for Quilted Joy itself. You can also review there on Facebook, or if you're watching it on YouTube, you can leave us a review there. So I do read everyone, and I so appreciate taking the time to spend a little time with me, and we can learn together. So next month, we will talk about how to quilt a hexie patchwork unit. So think about those hexies in your life and how you might be able to machine quilt them. We'll have a worksheet that you can download, and we'll go through some different ways to quilt a hexie design. So I hope that you're able to join me then. It'll be that first Wednesday in August at 1 o'clock Central, 1 o'clock Eastern, noon Central. And if you're on Mountain or Pacific, you can subtract from there. But we will be live, and we hope to get the bugs out so that we can live stream on YouTube. We always record it, though, and have it available to you to watch afterwards. So if you are working or have an appointment or something and can't be with us live, you can always watch that recording later. So thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Join us on Facebook. Join me on Instagram as well as I travel, and I'm going to be traveling the next month. I will post different photos of my travels over there on Instagram. So join us on Instagram, and I hope to see you back in the Clubhouse in August. Thanks so much.